Okay, so we've got a choice of four images, or you can work from still life. And I just thought these summed, autumn up because we are still in autumn. We're just kind of tipping into November now, aren't we? So there's some the beautiful kind of rustic colours about and the lovely colour palette. So getting lots of oranges and yellows and things like that in the flowers that are kind of just at the end of the season, aren't there? Amongst all the leaves and berries and things that are often in these bouquets. So it's a really lovely one to do. So just go for something that you feel, captures your interest, I would say, rather than what you think you should do. Because normally if we find something that we really connect to, it makes such a difference to us actually doing a piece. Um, and it's really, really nice to do that. So there's lots of ways of doing this. If you're working from life, just kind of work out, which way around your paper needs to go. Sometimes if a bouquet is wide, like this one, then, it works better landscape because it obviously takes up more, comes out that way more. Or you can just, work portrait, which is what I'm going to do with this one because it's quite upright. So, as I said, you can always sometimes if people are struggling to fit in the actual composition on their paper or board, then sorry, I've got a bit of feedback there. Then we can just you can take a photograph of something from life and then just use the two together. So you can work out how to fit it on the paper. Another way of if you're doing any composition that's quite busy, there's a lot going on in this one. I'm going to just do this in pen, and it's only so that it comes up on the camera for you. Otherwise, you won't be able to see it. So I'm just going to go over this in pen. But obviously, if you wanted to put like a half grid or a four-quarter grid on, that makes things really easy when you're getting back into something and something's very busy. It's to work out where you can place everything, and then you can transfer that lightly onto your paper as well. So again, you won't see it if I don't do it quite darkly, but if you're doing this, make it a really light coloured line that you can either paint over or kind of erase when you're ready to. Because what can happen is if it's a dark line, it can end up getting really scrubbed up underneath, and it can get a little bit muddy, the paints that go over the top. So keep it nice and light if you can do that. And then thinking about, obviously there's lots of background. What with something that's quite good with acrylics is that we tend to get the background on and have that coming through any gaps in the flowers. However, it's a bit of a balance. So we may as well put in anything that's a block of colour and then just bring that background in because we tend to work back to front with acrylics and start to layer up on top. So often we don't see our paintings really transform until like the really last kind of 10-15 minutes of the session actually, as we really start to add the details on the top, on some of the flowers. So we do quite a bit of something called blocking out actually. So I'm just going to use each of these quarters to map out where everything goes. And just work out, this pumpkin comes in a bit further over halfway up this side. It's just quite handy for getting to just kind of get our eye in, especially when we've been rushing around as well, because we don't sometimes have much time to stop and really look at things. And you can adjust, the thing is, you can adjust these lines or things anytime you want. I don't do much detail at all when I'm drawing in, if I'm using acrylics, just because there is so much, we tend to adjust things with our paintbrush a lot. So I'll just do a little bit of a little bit of kind of sketching in and then start to get the rest of it in with pencil. But if you feel like you want to be, it'll make you more confident putting a little bit more detail, that's fine. All I'd say is don't go really, really detailed because you'll end up then just painting over it and you think, oh, actually, I could have just, I could have hung in it. So it's a bit of a balance, really, like having enough that you feel that you know where everything's going. So I'm just getting these contours in, the curves in here, and kind of just working out whereabouts they are, and it really doesn't matter. So everything we do is is our own personal artist impression. We're not trying to recreate a photograph. We're trying to create our own artist impression. It's kind of a feeling as well. Sometimes we have like a little bit of a movement with our brush work and things like that, and we find what really suits us as well, because that's how we connect with our artwork. So from here, I might just have a little look at some of the bigger items in here, and I'm just going to put a few squiggles because I'm going to put most of this in with my brush. I'm just going to get in some of the bigger areas of this still life really. And I'm using the areas to work out how far they come up, how far they come across in each of the quarters. Just getting just a general idea of the flowers, just kind of a loose shape. As I said, because we'll end up doing lots of things ourselves in there. And then some colours down, some of the flowers that come behind down here. I'm just going to just following this theme down a little bit. Doesn't have to be perfection, we're just having a little go. Here we go there. So a little gap there between this one. And we can alter these anyway as we go. So I tend not to bother with a rubber unless it's really well out. I tend not to use one when I'm sketching these in. And I'm just following it round really. So I'm following these are kind of quite helpful because they come to the outside. As long as we can fit everything on that we need, that's the important thing. And each week you just pick up something a little bit different and work on that a little bit more. On the side just here. Just comes behind. And then probably I'll just pick out some of the bigger foliage of bits and pieces. But again, I'm really not going to get too worried about the shapes at this point. I'm just going to put those in as I go. Just some of the leaves. Sometimes we can't really see, it's such a mishmash of leaves that you might not be able to see the shape. So this is where we use the different colours and tones that we can see as we get going, and start to pop those in, and then that will create the shapes as well. It's, there's all sorts going on here, isn't there? Overlapping and things like that. So just do best bits and pieces that you can see, and then the rest we can pop in as we go. Like all of this going on in the middle here, I'm not really going to put, because there's so much overlapping, I'm not going to put anything at the front here that overlaps the back for the moment because these are very thin. We'll paint those straight over the top. Beauty with acrylics is we can just paint the things over the top, even if they're lighter. It's the opposite to watercolour, where watercolour is quite translucent, whereas these colours that are lighter will go straight over the top. So yeah, so that's great. So just pop something between here, just because it's a different colour block. Again, just a couple of bits and pieces coming out here. Can't really see. There's just like a weave of shapes there. But it's nice. It's really enjoyable having time just to sit and just look at the different things, shapes and things that we can see. And that's what it's all about, really. Just time spent looking and enjoying the colours that we can see in there. And then we can have a little play with the colours once we start to pop them in. So I might just pop this leaf that's sticking out between the two here. Slight colour, and that's it. Because there's all this going on, I'm going to come to that when I sort it. And again, some of the things in the background here, there's all sorts of different colours and things going on. And these last ones here at the top, I'm not going to put these in at all because I'm going to get my background in behind it and then just paint these over the top later on. So there we go. So I think for me, maybe just this pine cone's quite solid. I'll just put a bit of a shape in there, but I'm not going to put any detail or anything in there. table probably. And again, it's about being selective and making this painting completely yours. So you've got a full artistic license, it's your artwork. So you might decide you don't want all the fussiness of all of the things on here, whichever one you're doing, or you can take flowers out, if something feels like it's too, you don't want that in there. Um, you can take that out. Like some of these ones here, you might not want those on the table. You might find it too distracting. Some of the things in the background here as well. Or you might want to put everything in. You might also want to completely change the background colour here to a different colour completely. So, and absolutely you can do that. It's yours. Yours to do that. So what I'm actually going to do now is kind of just leave this a little bit, right? What you can do, if it helps, is just get rid of your line there. If that helps to work out, because now we've got some of the big gaps, it's much easier then to see these little areas between here. Um, and then we can work out that without the grid really then from there on in. So really we're going to think about getting this background in next. So I'll just show you the brushes I've got as well. So help. So I've got a flat brush, which is really great for getting kind of a good kind of clear background on there. It works for wood and things as well because you get that downward shape with it or across. And it also creates quite a nice smooth effect as well because we can work it in. And they come in all sorts of sizes from really big to really small. And we can use the edge of these flat brushes as well to do some stems and things. And then I've got some round brushes in here. I'll pop in use this to do a few of the contours on the pumpkin so I can get a nice curve. So with these, you can really kind of push them down and get them right into the curves, which is really nice. And then for anybody who wanted to try it, there was a list on the side which was just showing some other brushes. So I've got a filbert brush here, which I'll just introduce kind of when I'm doing some of these leaves, twists of the leaves and things, because they're great for getting into the shapes of the leaves because you can twist them on their side and then bring them back out again. So you can use them to get really thinner lines and also like wider ones as well, and the twists and turns, which is nice. And then finally, you can use a really thin round brush, or you can use something called a rigger, and that's really helpful sometimes for doing longer, thin pieces of, grasses and things like that, because it can pull them down. So I'll just introduce that. You could always go, if you haven't got one, just go and, try one later if you fancied doing it. But it's just to introduce a few little bits and pieces that you might or might not have used, or that you've got in your kit and you think, gosh, I've had this sat here for ages and I've not used it. So I'm going to mix up some colours for the background. So you go for whatever you fancy. I'm going to start with some white because I'm going to mix up a tint. So a tint is any colour mixed with white, basically. It can make it very pastel-y in colour. So if you're wanting a much more bright version, then you might not want to mix white in at all. You might want to go in with a full colour. But anything that you want a pastel effect, then white's a good colour to mix. And actually, sometimes we stay away from white when we're using these vibrant colours in here, because it takes the colour and the warmth out of it. So great for backgrounds and skies and all sorts of things. But if you're wanting to keep those nice warm colours, then we may not use that at all. You might decide you don't want to. But I've just got my little palette knife I'm going to mix with that. And then it's just deciding on a background. So I'm actually going to go for a little bit of blue because I do love a blue contrast to like these warmer colours. So as I said, you can go with whatever you want. You can stick to something similar to that and put a couple of different colours in. I'm going to go for blue because I'm very much an advocate of going for what you want to do. This one is a phthalo blue, and I really like that. So it's just that kind of lovely Mediterranean-y colour. It's just got a little bit more depth to it. But your typical colours in your kit are ultramarine blues. There's all sorts. And you can also, use two different tones as well. Now, depending on the acrylic paints that you've got or the colours that you're using, if you're working in pencils and things like that, you might want to just think about making sure that you've got your lightest colours in first. So maybe working back to in the opposite way to this, building up your colours from light to darks, whereas we can, with the acrylics, you can just go in and layer up. But with pencils, you sometimes obviously can't layer up the darker colours, lighter colours over the dark ones. It's a little bit similar to watercolour in that respect. And then also I am gonna put a little bit of a darker one because you can vary these backgrounds slightly with a little bit of a darker colour in there as well. Just gives it a little bit of variety. All of the brands are so different, the paints, that I can't, all we're learning really is to think about is the how your paint or material responds to the paper that you've got and that kind of thing. So just enjoy doing that. So some are really quite buttery and quite much thinner. Some acrylics are really heavy bodied. So they're really thick and you have to add quite a bit of water to them to get them to move. And then there's everything in between. So what you want is, for the background certainly, is a nice kind of buttery consistency that's going to move really easily. I've just got like a little pipette that I'm just going to add the water to. I'm just going to put a couple of drops in there. But don't worry, just explore, have a little explore rather than getting too bogged down with how much exactly to put on. Just have a little play. If it feels like it's dragging, then have add a little bit more water and a bit more paint. Sometimes people don't put quite enough paint on, so you do need plenty so it can glide. So when I'm doing this, I'll wet my brush, but I will probably put on, I've got quite a lot sticking off. If I turn that sideways, you can see it's kind of quite a big lump of paint on there, because I want to get a good coverage and I want it to move really pleasantly for me. So you should feel like it's going to move backwards and forwards really easily. You can go side to side, just kind of have a little play and see what works for you. So because we want this paint to kind of come into the background a little bit, I'm just going to bring it in, just in case I change anywhere where I'm going to put this, where I'm going to put the flower heads. So I tend to bring it in just a little bit over where it might come to. I can always pop the flowers back in. Just so that we're not faffing about later, trying to squeeze a bit of the background colour through. And just enjoy starting to kind of just get a feel for how the paint or the materials that you're using are feeling. I'm bringing a bit of paint in there because I can see there's a few gaps behind this edge here. I can always paint over it with the foliage that's coming, but the reason we do this is it can be, certainly with things like flowers, it can be really quite faffy to try and put them in after. And it can look a little bit false as well. So it's quite nice to, if you can, bring it. If it doesn't work out, it's fine. We learn little bits as we go. We can do anything pretty much with the acrylic paint to cover, any little bits. We can pop bits back in. We can bring the colour back over. So this is more of a block here. So all I'm thinking about is like this outer edge down there, really. I'm just going right over my tape as well. I've taped this up a little bit. So the background, you can keep it moving and blend it with the edge of the flat brush, or you can get some nice movement in there. So just a little, just enjoy putting some of those colours and things in. whichever you've gone for. Have a little look soon. And then whilst, whilst that is damp there, bringing that in a little bit. Then, you can work in a slightly darker colour if you want to. You can have it plain. You can bring in the planks. It's entirely up to you. So I'm going to bring a darker one in. I'm just mixing that in there. And a lot of it's just having a little, manipulating the paint a little bit. So if you're wanting that kind of, rusticy feel, you can just kind of drag down some paint, some darker paint, and just don't kind of like press down too hard, just keep it nice and light. You can also use a palette knife to do that as well. But you don't even have to put any planks on at all. You can just, work that back together here. So it's not like, if you do it, that's the beauty, because whilst it's still damp and you've got plenty on your brush, you can just reblend things together if you think, oh, I'm not really keen on that effect. You don't want to put that rustic side on. And then some lighter colours as well. If you want a few lighter ones in there, just pop a few in. So a background doesn't have to be just one colour at all. So yeah, just have a little play until you feel that you want to just to stop there. And also you don't really have to do it all now. Sometimes you don't always know what you want your background to look like um, until you've got a bit nearer the end. So you can always go back and work over the top. That's again the beauty of acrylics. You can just continue to work things over or whichever. I'm going to stop there with a little flat brush now. Just going to pop something in at the bottom as well. But you don't have to. You can work your way down if you want and, and do bits that are separate out. I'm going to get mine in, so I'm just going to decide on what colour I'm going to go for. I'm going to go for a slightly lighter one. So this is called Buff Titanium, this one. And it's just basically white without the bleach in it. But you could use any colour whatever you've got. I'm going to mix that. And I'm going to have a little bit, a really small amount of green colour in there as well with it. See, you can always test it out first on your bit of paper. If you've got a bit of paper handy, it's always quite nice to test out little colour palettes, which I'm going to do in a mo. Just make sure my palette nice clean, so I don't transfer any over. So just keep having a mix until you end up with a colour that you're happy with, really. Quite pastelist. I wanted to keep it quite pastel because I wanted to have that nice pop of the colours really showing through. So I kept this nice and light. I always test it with just a small brush, but just it with what you like. Yeah. And you can test your colours together as well, see if they work together on the palette. Yeah, I quite like that. So again, you choose which brush you feel. If you want to try a different one, that's fine. I'm just going to stick with a flat just because I find that really easy to put backgrounds on with. But again, if you're just getting used to your brushes, just have a little play and see what What do you prefer? Yeah, I'm just going over my tape. And of course you can change any of these. If you want to move, if you wanted to move up your table edge or anything like that, then you can do that. If you can change the proportions of anything that we're doing. If you think, oh, I want a bit more table or I want a bit more background in there, it's absolutely fine. So whilst that's done, just going to go in a little bit and put a little bit of shadow under here. So I'm not going to actually put these leaves in. I'm going to use this dark sap green that I've got here just to create a little bit of shadow underneath where we can see a little bit of shadow under here. Just usually you get that underneath anything that's quite deep, like a pumpkin or a vase. It's where it casts the shadow. I mean, some of this might be under piles of leaves as well, but we do tend to get more of a shadow there, right underneath. So, you know, it might be even darker there. So just have a little play. And then I'm going to bring this shadow out, but I'm actually just going to like make it a little bit less intense as it comes out and just mix in some of the paint that's already there. Just reserve the really dark area to where it is directly underneath the pumpkin. So there's still a bit of a shadow cast under there, but not quite as dark. You can tap it as well if you want to kind of make it looser. And don't worry if it overspills into, you know, your vase or the pumpkin or whatever. That's fine. Because we can go back the other way. So I think I'm going to pop the pumpkin in underneath because we have to look at what overlaps what. So the flowers will overlap the top of the pumpkin here. So if we get that pumpkin in, doesn't matter if you've started with the flowers, that's fine as well. Work your way down and get that done. The biggest thing I would say though, because you know, if you've gone from cool colours, like a cool palette, like anything with blue in it, which obviously I have done, just make sure your brushes are really clean at the bottom because what we can get real quite muddy paints. So you can see it's still just, you can just get a bit of kitchen or a bit of a flannel or something and or a cloth and just kind of make sure you wipe it out through the middle because it does sit, sometimes it sits in the bottom and then people say, oh no, it's gone really muddy. So also maybe having another pot of water handy as well is quite helpful. Um, but you can do that, just grab one at any time, it's fine. Um, there we go. And then just gonna think about some mixing some colours. So if you've got, you know, orange as it is, you can go in with an orange. If you haven't, I haven't. I'm just going to look at the types of reds and yellows I've got available to me. So sometimes you might have, so I've got a couple of yellows here. Sometimes you get quite a few yellows in your kit, and other times you might just have one, but that's fine because what I can do, so you'll see here there's two yellows. This one is much brighter. The primary yellow is more acidic. It's got less warmth to it. And this one, Cadium, it's Nazo yellow, but it's similar to Cadium yellow. It's just got more red. So it has less red, this one, and this is leaning more towards red. It's much warmer, and you can see that. And obviously orange is much, it has got even more red in it. So, you know, this one's much brighter and lighter. It's got more, probably a little bit less colour in it and a bit more less red and a bit more white in it as well. And lemon yellow is very similar too. So just see, so have a play with the colours that you've got in your kit and see which makes the best one. You may have another red as well. So, and yeah, you see like this one. So that's Cajun red. That's got more yellow in it, and that one is a scarlet. That's got more actual red in it. So that's still on the yellow spectrum. So we have all these different colours. Each of these colours may have more yellow or more red, and it also some of the reds, like alizarin crimson, if you've got that in your set, that is got more blue in it, so it leans cool. But we'll go through some of those as we go. So I'm just going to get some red out, but it's a great opportunity to just really explore and experiment with some of the colours. I will just do a little bit of this colour mixing here, and then I'll stop and come and chat to everybody. So it's always a good thing, same if you've got your pencils, you can practice over layering them and seeing which colours you like together. That works quite well. So try, if you've got a couple of yellows, try mixing the different ones with a bit of red. Excuse me, and see what happens when you mix them. If you're not sure, you can always start. I think red's quite an overpowering colour anyway. So if I'm mixing an orange, I always put far less than I would, far less red in than I would if I was mixing, say, a blue. So if I'm doing a blue, like a tint, like a background, I'd probably put 50-50 in to start with, but red will just completely overpower that. So I'm going to go in with a very small percentage of red and much more yellow. It's still very, very bright, that, so I could have got away with even less red, but that's fine. I'll use that as one of the colours in the flowers. Try the yellow as well. But yeah, that's what it's all about, just exploring the colours that you've got in your kit, re-exploring them even. Until you get something. But as I said, a lot of the kits have got oranges in them and things, haven't they? But you can really mix up your own. You just have to work out how much of each colour to put in. That's quite enjoyable, just experimenting with it. Want it more orangey, warmer, just add more red, etc. It's all good. Try it out. This is how we really make, I think, good leaps forwards with in terms of understanding colour is actually just by mixing it, literally. I'm just going to test that. So you want to make sure your water's nice and clear when you're starting with the warms. Okay, so I'm going to go for this base. So I'm just going to go with this base that I've mixed up, and then I'll start to blend in some slightly darker tones with the pumpkin. We're going to be making some shape on the pumpkin just by using the contour lines that come around, but also by adding in the darker colours. That will make the darker shadows make things go away into the background or recede, and then the brighter, lighter colours will pop forwards, and that helps us to create the shape of a pumpkin or anything in that for that matter. It's a good rule to use.
Can I ask a question, Becca?
Of course.
Sorry,
So you can do this if you've got if you've chosen the A1 with a vase as well. Yeah, it's just getting all of the things that are inside the vase that you can see first. Um, and then working forward. So on a vase, the glass is the very last thing that we would do over the top. You get all of this in behind any orangey colours. And then the very last thing is any kind of reflections on the glass over the top. That will be the very last thing. And often in a vase, they're more muted colours or darker underneath, unless it's in full light, that's slightly different. So I'm just using a nice round brush here, just so I can kind of pull the contour lines in, and round. And I'm just squashing like the edge of my brush to do that. Again, that's quite a just getting used to the brushes and things like that, and the tools that we've got. How we can use them. So while I've got that there, I'm now going to work in some of the darker shadows. And when I say darker, they actually might not be that dark on your painting. You can go as dark or as light as you want. So sometimes a shadow, we think often, don't we, shadows have got to be, black or a grey, and actually they don't at all. So it can just be a subtle change. So you might have like red colours, like a darker version is a reddy colour, or slightly more orangey, like with a warmer red in it. So that can just be simply what the shadow is. I've just added to my palette there, I've just added some burnt sienna, which is like a reddy brown, and might just use some of that actually in these flowers at the top. I might use a little bit of it in the shadow as well. I'll have a look. But again, just keep testing to see what you prefer. And if you do need a water change, please feel free just to go and do that. So I'm going to bring in a little bit of this red colour here. Just mix this up. I'm just doing this with my brush at the moment. It's not much on. It doesn't feel too warm down there. It feels like it could have a bit of this brown colour in it, this burnt sienna. Again, that's a typical colour you get in a kit often. And so I'm going to put it next to this one and see how that feels, whether it feels it's a bit too dark. And this is so personal. It doesn't have to be any of these colours. It can be exactly a colour combination that you like. So some people like what we call a strong contrast, where you've got quite a big difference between the light and the brights and the darks. And other people like more of a muted contrast. It doesn't matter as long as you've got some contrast, because that helps create the shape in there. So you can always add, a little bit more of this orange colour into it, so the change is less obvious. So you can see that difference there. And start with that. So I'm just going to come down the bottom here. I'm just going to pop it in. So this effectively, when we put shadow in, effectively it kind of flattens the shape a little bit, or it goes away. So that's why we're putting it where the shadows are falling, where it's going away, basically, where the bottom of it's kind of you can't, it's not getting much light down there. It just creates a bit of 3D-ness a 3D effect in there. Same with vases and things, actually. Sometimes you just get areas on it that look like they're going away, especially if it's not in the light, and other areas that feel like they're coming up. So you just pop in a little bit of dark. And if it's the first time you've done this, then, just go with it and see. It's just an opportunity just to explore it a little. So I'm now bringing a bit of dark shadow into some of these contour lines here, because I need a little bit of a contrast so I can actually see the shape of the pumpkin. So I'm looking carefully as to where I'm seeing the shadow because it might not be everywhere, actually. We've got to be careful we don't put too much of something in and just only put it really where it's definitely a bit more different. But what I will do is this is kind of creeping up a little bit there. But again, it's all about the looking and just absorbing yourself into a space where you really just think, oh wow, I never even noticed that before, how the light falls. That's great, you've learned something. And it's all good basically. And then I'm just going to come through and just now look at some of the other kind of yellowy colours maybe that I'm seeing on here that are a bit brighter. So we're going lighter, brighter as we go through. The reason we put that dark on, you can put the dark in first if you can see it. Sometimes it's a bit hard with something like this because the colours are reflected off the pumpkin, so sometimes it comes off the top. But you can put that in where you as you're doing it. But we tend not to put the shadow in over the top unless it's a dark flower or something. And there are other rules where we do break it. You know, we have to break their rules to do it as well because something naturally occurs and it's lighter, brighter over the top. But we tend to put the darker colours on earlier so that we don't flatten the shape. We keep it nice and rounded in these light, bright colours. This is me going in with a bright yellow, just where I'm seeing some of the maybe the slightly brighter areas, not where the light bits are reflecting, but on that pumpkin it'll create a little bit of shape again because I'm not just putting an orange, a darker colour and a white. I'm actually looking and thinking, oh, there's a bit of, I'm seeing yellow in there. You might see something else. But if you put a couple of what we call mid-tones, like a couple of like colours within the pumpkin, that'll make it even more 3D. And it's the same goes for anything. If you were doing a fruit, for example. I'm just going to pop this down here. I'm seeing a little bit of lighter on that side there. And all we can do, as I said, is just go with the observation. And then finally, we're building it up. This is exactly what the great thing about doing this with when we're doing this with the acrylics is we just then go in with a light colour, just where we can see that reflection. Now you can go in with bright white if you want to. I tend to go in just with a bit of a tint. So I'm going to put a tiny bit of yellow in that white, just so it's not so intense. Sometimes whites aren't always white. So the best way to try is to work out if it's white is compare your paper. And if it is as white as that, then by all means go in and do it. But if it, when you look at it, you think, oh, it's not quite white, it's a good way of checking it. So I'm just going to go in now with just a nice, just the tip of my brush. This is quite a big brush, but you can use brushes lightly, with a light touch as well. And I'm just following where I'm seeing just this little reflection on top of the pumpkin. I'm going to go with a bit of a brighter colour over here because it's not giving me as much contrast as I'm after. And then again, we'll have much more, we'll be getting much more contrast in there, and then that will give us lots of shape. Now I'm going to stop there for now, and I'll come and have a chat with everybody and see how you're getting on. See if you're starting to enjoy the process a bit more. It's always a bit when we're getting back into it. We're not painted for a while. This takes a little bit of a time. Okay, so just having a think about the flowers and things that go in here. So obviously there's a big mass, and it's like, well, it does can kind of be like quite off-putting for people as to where to start. So usually I just kind of suggest getting in some kind of more bold shapes just to start with, because as we were mentioning earlier, there's such a mishmash of shapes. We can't really even see in a massive amount of detail what's going on. I mean, obviously, if you've got an A4 version, you'll be able to see a little bit more of it. But when we're looking at the small one, it's more difficult to see. So what we're thinking about is just popping some shapes in that we can see. So this bit down here, obviously we've got all the dark bits in the middle, which I'll come back to. But if you wanted to just try and get this bottom half in here, which is very different to this top half with all the shadows in, then we can just have a little look. I'm going to put that flower on there in a bit, but I'm just going to think, what have we got? Well, we've got some shadow here. So I'm just going to go in with a dark green and just pop in a few little marks whereabouts I think this shadow is going to go. It doesn't matter if it's not perfect because we can adapt it later. I'm just going to get these kind of dark ones. Sometimes putting the shadow in that goes between the leaves helps us to kind of decide where everything's going to go as well. So we've got these, these really dark ones, and there's lots going on, and there's lots of twisting, and then we've got some orangey ones. So really, let's just go in and just get a brush. You can go in with your filbert brush and make some twisty ones, or just your round brush. It doesn't really matter. So what I suggest with that is thinking about having, some different colours for, say, the ones over here, some reds. And I'm going to bring in a bit of this burnt sienna for some darkness. So we've got this red here that's more of a scarlet. And then I've got this one that's a more of a cadmium. It's slightly different tones there. But then we've also got some lighter colours. It's almost like a bit peachy. So I'm going to bring those in after. I'm just going to start by getting one of my reds, and I'm just going to go and just create just what I can see, which looks like just a kind of put some frilly shapes in there. We genuinely can't see what those shapes are really detailed when it's small. So I've just got I've just got this like frilly edge. And it's not very delicate at all, but I don't really need to do that to start with, because we can't make that out anyway. I might bring a bit of the orangey red in there, um, and a bit of a peachy colour. So to get a peachy colour, we can just put a bit of a yellow or a warmer yellow in with a red. Now, this will make it more pastely, but the bits at the top here are, so that's fine. So I've got a bit of red and a bit of a warmer yellow, but it doesn't matter which one, just see what we've got. And then just a little bit of white will make this more peachy. So it'll make it less intense, but that's fine for the edges of these, because these bits seem to catch the light. So they are a little bit less intense and a bit more pastely anyway. So I'm going to use that just for the edge. You can use your little brush there, or you could use your, I'm just going to use my fill, but either way. And then I'm just going to bring in just a bit of lighter bits where I'm seeing um, just a bit of light catching it. Now, this still isn't going to look like a really good leaf, because we can't really see that in massive detail anyway. So the underside bit isn't the bit our eye's drawn into. It's drawn into these really bright flowers in the middle, actually. So a lot of the things we worry about the most completely sink into the background once we get the brightness of these other flowers in, because they're going to pop forwards. So we don't need to worry anything like as much as we think we should about a lot of these shapes here. So I'm going to go in now with a bit of this burnt sienna colour and a bit of red together. Just here, let's see what happens, because I want a slightly darker colour in there. Let's see what it's like on here. Okay, yeah, so that's more browny red there, which is what we'd expect by adding the burnt sienna, which is a reddy brown, with some red. So I'm just going to do what I think is going on here next And again, I don't know. I can see almost some starry shape. So I'm just going to try and pop in whatever I think I can see with a few little points. And that's it really. There's nothing much going on there with that at all. And then again, I'm just going to go and put a highlight in, which is very light peachy colour there, or whatever it is you think you can see. You know, it might be slightly different to mine. We all see slightly different colours, which is good. It's the joy of looking, isn't it? Then I'm just going to pop, where I can see a little highlight on the edge here or on the, just going to pop a little highlight. And again, can't really see too much. So we're just getting a few shapes together. It'll all make sense once we get the other things in anyway. And then I am going to put some much darker in the middle because I can see down here, it feels really dark down there. And then over the top of that, I can see that there's some lighter colours as well. So let's try that. And that's it. So that's all I'm going to do for that. Not worrying too much about it. We've got all this other detail with the flowers up here that we can pop in. And the bits we can't tell, we just do best fit and focus more on the flowers where there is a little bit more structure and repetition. And then again, you're moving along. What else can we see is one more pinky. Do we need a little bit of, doesn't one need to be a bit more like magenta, colour of like a bright pink in there? In fact, I might try that over the top of this one. Just go in with a pink or a magenta, which is a more of a purpley pink. So I can go in, let's try that out first. Might put a little bit more brown in this colour. And then put some of this bright pink in as well. Just so it's slightly different. And again, I can't really see a massive amount of detail, but I can see just a few shapes of overlapping. Now, you might not be able to see it when you put it on. It might just look like a ball when you put it on, but it's what we do to it with the other colours, the other pops of colour. So I'm going to go in with a brighter one and create just some little kind of layers of something on there. I can pop a bit of highlight. And I'm not going to do too much more than that, to be fair, because that's going to go underneath, really. If there's anything else that's a bit more highlighted, might even be a pop of a yellowy colour in there, actually, I'm seeing. Might just pop that in. So we're just representing what we can see and just making that nice and loose. And then I'm going to pop this green in. So greens take all shapes up. You can get really dark greens. And this is the difference. So this is a sap green in one colour, which I say is more like a darker green. And then this is a sap green in another colour. So you can see the vast differences between them. So, just go in with which colour you think, really. You can even mix together if you want. Some of these leaves actually on this particular one are slightly, I'd say, pastel-y. So I'm going to go in with one colour underneath and then I'm going to highlight it with a slightly lighter one. So we can see that there's kind of something there, something there, something there. So that's all. When I would represent something, I would literally just do that, one side, one side. I can't see more than that. That's what we're all, we're just seeing slightly different things, aren't we here? Just a few little shapes. That's all we can do. That's all a lot of the greats did. Now, obviously, if you have 6 hours, that's a whole different, you can really get pulled in. And this is a little study, but if you're enjoying, but alternatively, if you're enjoying the detail, there's absolutely nothing wrong with getting pulled into that because there's nothing, it's nice to work loose as well. However, there's nothing wrong with working in the detail of things. If it brings you joy, then do it. So I've mixed a little bit of white with some of this green, and I'm just going to, again, just pull through slightly lighter colour onto that leaf. So it feels we've got some kind of a shape, but not a lot really. Again, it's quite hidden. That's all I can do, just a few little shapes there. And then, we can kind of work our way around. So this feels much more orangey yellow over this side, peachy orangey yellow. So I'm going to explore that. And I'm going to, we'll bring in some darker colours in there as well. But again, what are we seeing there? I'm just seeing a little bit there, a bit over here. And some of it is just almost putting a really unusual shape in, and then, because it might not look like anything. And then we'll just go in and we'll use a darker colour in in the underside of it where it's dark, and that dark shadow creates a little bit of the shape of the leaf folding over there. So sometimes the darker colours we put in create the shape. Sometimes it's the pops of shape colours as well. So I can put the dark in and then just dab on the brighter, lighter one as well. Bit of a highlight just here. So it just catches the light a bit, but again, no, it's just a series of little brush sparks and strokes. Doesn't need to be perfect at all. And then, just have a little go at what other things you can see, shapes now, just keep adding to it as along. Keep adding a few different shapes. And you can go in and pop a little bit of any shadows in there. But our brain does a lot at this stage. The brain doesn't like it because it can't see the finished product, but it will work it out as we get the other shapes in it. It'll work it out for us. So we do genuinely need to worry a lot less about these kind of things than we do. I would say so anyway. And then, towards the middle, might be some real shadows in there. You might want to go in with an even darker brown, actually. You might think, oh, it's really dark in the middle. I'm not, how am I going to get a colour that deep? So you can go in with a really dark green. If your sap green's dark, you can use that. You could use another colour called hooker's green, which is normally the darkest. Or you could just put a bit of like dark brown in there as well. So you'll see now, because I'm getting this shadow around where we can see it, this flower there, when we put that in, will really pop against the dark bit because it shows how far backwards this goes. It's quite a deep thing. So we're just building it up like that. And you can pop this flower in if it feels like you've got, you need to get something in so you can see what's going on along this mass. And let's just go for it and put it in, even if it means that we've got to put a little bit something else as this shadow behind it. Yes, we should probably put all of those in, but actually, in terms of when we're doing a piece of work, sometimes or a piece of artwork, we just need a little bit of a a little bit of something to help us along the way so we can then do the next bit. And I think that's a really good thing. So I'm going to put in, so we've got contrasting colours, and this is where we can be really creative with the mush, your mark making. You can go in, I can mix in a little bit of darker colour through the middle. So I can just pop lots of brush strokes in like this, dot it in, dot it kind of in, and then you can tap it in if that feels really good, or you can kind of pop lines in with your brush. Just go with what's feels good, and I can overlap that. Just get some just use the end tip of my brush to get that shape in, or you can even use the edge of a flat brush if you wanted to get that in, or you could try a filbert. You can even try a cotton bud or something like that as well, so that you're, just literally just dip it in the paint and then you're pulling it out. And then when you've got your painting, there's lots of ways of making marks. It doesn't always have to be using a paintbrush. But when you've got that in, then you can start to work in, some of the dark colours between, literally just by tapping, just getting enough on your brush. So you can try to test it first on something. This works great with pencils as well, because you really get into the detail with that. And then just start popping, getting work some of that shadow between the petals, where it's darkest in the centre. And if you get too much on, like obviously I've put too much on, it's too heavy now, I can take a bit back off, because acrylic is great for that as well. Take that off, and then I can just go back in with some more yellow over the top. Like that. Just tap it in. So, you can make these any shape you want, because it's a suggestion, it's an artist's impression of the flowers, just like the great artist did, because it's a joy to see the mark making more than anything else. That's how we can identify people's work. It's not because it looks like a photograph necessarily. Now, obviously, that is a specific type of art as well, but the majority is just, it's very distinctive, isn't it? Because you're just kind of getting in and doing what feels right to you. So I would just stop there with that, unless there's anything else that I want to put in, or any the colours that I think, oh, did I want to put a highlight in with a bit of white, for example? But I wouldn't put that many places at all personally, just because I can just use the yellow to do this similar effect, and then keep that really warm colour. So I'm just going to wash these brushes off a little bit, because what can happen with acrylic is your brushes can splay open and it gets caught down the bottom. So if it feels like it's like kind of getting really swollen with paint, just give it a good rinse. Really kind of pat it out, like squash it at the side of your water pot, and then really just push it through. You can even pull it up like that, so it'll just bring everything back together, so it's easy for you. And then from there, we can just go in with all of these other colours we can see behind. And I'm looking on these, anything coming over the top, like these really fine grasses, I'm going to leave those completely till the end. So I'm just going to go in with some colours I can see. Maybe you want to use purple. I'm going to add burnt umber, which is a really, really dark brown, because I want a bit more contrast. Some of these are very dark, but you could put purples in there. Just have a really good play. So I will come and chat to everyone in a minute when I've just popped a little bit of this in. I'm just pulling whatever shapes I think I can see. I'm not entirely sure. It feels like there's something structural in there. And again, we'll be overlaying things anyway, so we don't need to really worry too much about it. Just practice making, like getting the feel of the directional movement is a really great thing to do. Which way is it moving? Can you feel a flow with it? That's what is really helpful for us. There's a little bit of a leaf that comes over the top of there. So I'm going to pop that one over. And again, I can't see too much shape, but I'll put in what I can. And then I'm going to put a highlight over the top of that so I can see a bit more of that leaf. But a lot of the time we've got a couple of colours on so we can see. With just one, we can't always. We need the shadow and we need the bit of the highlight in there just so we can see it layering up. And then we're just looking through, what else can we see? Are there any other colours? Is there anything else kind of popping through the back that we need? Are there any other shapes in there? Just answering all of these questions as we're doing it. Is there more shadow anywhere that we need to pop in? And we're just working way around, and all of a sudden, it just starts to take shape. So just keep going. I'll come and chat to you in a few minutes. Putting those big shapes on. There is quite a lot in this one. And then the last bits I will put over the top. So I've got obviously some more of these lovely coloured brighter flowers in here as well. There's a few bright red ones in the back. And the more we look, the more we can see. But it's not till we've got all of that in that we'll pull some of those other colours, like these lighter little strands over the top. And I'll show you with a rigger how we can pop that in. But it really is just a series of movements. That's all we're doing. And get this one in the background here. It's lovely. Well, and again, we just it's picking up just a few. Oh, you can pop a darker one on first if you want, and then when you pop your light leaves over the top, you'll be able to see them through. That's a good other way of doing it as well. So put like maybe a more of an orangey reddy base on, and then when you start popping all the bits over the top with a brighter colour. And what naturally happens actually is we get looser the more we do of the same flower because we get more comfortable and in the flow with it, and we can so the flower we start with is often the most detailed, but as we go through, we're just picking up and we're like, oh, well, I recognise that now. The more we do a study, which is why I think it's great to do these little studies because we can really see as we go through, we get more comfortable with the shape. We recognise like the way it flows, any similarities, and it then starts to become a kind of more enjoyable process really as we go through, where we can just start to, get some of these shapes in through there. And again, you can work if there's any darker bits in there you want to get in, by all means, start tapping those darker ones in. But just keep enjoying it. And then obviously between these little sections that we do, we can then see the change. I'm just popping a little bit of white on that one because it's a little bit lighter here on some of these petals that are catching the light there. And then again, just keep going because you'll be seeing other leaves then underneath start to appear, and it just all gets a bit easier as you go through the process. 'Cause it's like, oh yeah, I've seen a leaf a little bit like that before, and um, it's a similar shape to the last one. So it's all just experience of seeing other things a similar shape in a bouquet. And that's it. There's not really an awful lot of mystery to it. Get this leaf and then come to think of adding on the leaf there. I'm just adding a different one completely in there, but that's fine. And again, I'm popping a different shade over the top of that one so it pops a little bit. And I'll pop this one in here as well now. So yeah, sometimes we have to kind of just stop and then just put some of these other bigger, nice, these bigger colours on. You can push the point down on your um, brush. You wanting to get it a little bit, more pointed. And turn it round. And again, you might need to layer up some paint a couple of times if your paint's quite translucent. Just go in quite thickly with it. Get this bit of an impression style anyway, isn't it, when you're doing that? And then all of a sudden, at this stage, things start to feel a little bit more like we're getting a shape in here. And our brain's getting more comfortable. A lot of it, we get put off by what because our thoughts are telling us it's not working. But then as we work through it, our brain's like, oh yeah, we just have to keep pushing through a little bit on those times with the artwork. Because it's a process, it will come together, but it's like anything, we'll go into that kind of it's not, it doesn't look like symmetry when we start, so just keep going with it. And again, you might want to pop some little darker colours through or whatever, and in your style. So if you're finding like you're dabbing and making all these shapes, and you're really enjoying it, that's fabulous. Just go for it. We'll all have something really different, which is great. And then just keep adding in all these little elements, that are popping out. You'll start to see some things. Get those in. Lights, lights, other things. One step at a time, these things start to work. We get bolder as we get nearer, which is real. Just building up, aren't we? Pine cone now, which is quite dark. So with the pine cones, we're working reverse. You get a really dark shape in there. And then you go in with a light colour and just dab on. There's lots of little taps of shape where the cone is catching the light. and just keep working your way around. So that some of these thinner strands, I'll just demonstrate some of those. Um, some of these thinner shapes that we've got on here. So this is how you can kind of utilize a rigger brush. So I would just dip it in the water like that. Just get rid of the excess water. And then whichever colour you're going for, so I want quite a light one for these. I'm gonna roll it actually in this buff titanium. And you just literally just roll it all the way through. I always put water on so it'll drag quite easily. And then you can just pull, just leave that paint so I don't knock it down. You can just pull it really easily over the top up your paint. Sometimes if it's very wet underneath, it might pick up the wet paint. So all we're doing here is pulling it all the way over. And it's so easy to use. You can just drag it. So that's how we get these little strands over there. But you can use like the end of you can use the end of your a very fine brush as well. So we can put these other bits in different colours as well. So seeing all of these up here. I tend to work up and flick, but you can work the other way as well. Like you can just drag it down. But the thing is, because it doesn't stop your flow when you use a rigger. You can just keep it moving, and it helps us to be a bit more loose in that respect. In that we're not like thinking, "Oh, God, this isn't. I need to make this perfect shape or whatever." And then I'm just going to use. I'm not sure what the shapes of these are, but I'm just tapping on the top just to create whatever it is I think I can see. The shapes of these flowers on the top, and then we've got some other ones around the back. So again, we're not really with a lot of these flowers, unless you're drawing or painting them all the time, we're just coming up with new topics. If you're studying flowers all day, it's a different story, but most of the time we're not, unless you're lucky enough, and that's what you do as well with your job. Um, so yeah, so anything new topics, it's all to learn different shapes. And again, I'm just going to continue on that, but there's a few darker ones. I'm going to bring these in, I'm going to use that. Get a little highlight in there. So again, dark and a light, dark and a light. Start popping these in. It just suddenly starts to pop over. Just start to get all these shapes in. Light ones again over the top so you can see. Sometimes when we've got a lot of these kind of fine ones, you don't necessarily need loads of colours on those. You just need a bit of a contrast between them. Oh, so let's continue on for a minute and then I'll come and chat with everybody. And again here, so some of the shapes here, again, we just, you can, I'm just taking a yellow and a white together here. And I don't really know what this, how to exactly represent it, but that's how it feels comfortable to me. So a lot of this is being comfortable to just create a shape that you feel looks like that to you. So I'm just, one side, another, like that. But that's just what's naturally coming out. And as we kind of practice anything like florals or whatever, like I was saying, you'll do one and then you think, oh yeah, that feels okay. I'm going to do that again. And then before we know it, um we've got some symmetry there. And it's starting to look like a bouquet, isn't it? Because we've got all these different elements into place. I haven't got all the way down here today. I will get that in later for you, but I'm going to stop so I can chat to you because that's really important. So let's come back. big pores there. Now, just finish this last little bit here. And I'm not rushing, and don't rush at all when you're doing this. Get as far as you can or you want to. And that might mean getting completely happily lost in the detail of just one area, and that's absolutely fine as well. So I'm just going to see what's going on here. Just finish off a little bit of this. Get some orange mixed up. And some just kind of pops of orange in there or yellow or something. Some colours underneath here. Again, can't really tell too much what's going on. I'm just exploring and adding on. It's all good fun. Oh, centers. So we're just kind of creating some of the little things we can see, just continuing to do that. I'm just getting them underneath these flowers, so now I can go over the top with that. So this is quite bright, quite vibrant. So I'm definitely going in with a make sure I'm not picking up the paint underneath that. Sometimes it gets a little bit saturated. Put this big flower in here. Over the top. I'm just going with a slightly darker colour underneath, but I want to lighten up again. Just remember to put a couple of white ones in there. It's catching the light. Not everywhere though, otherwise it just can't really see where it's, you've got the bright ones. It's everywhere. And then I think the last thing is just to pop on some of these fronds again. Put them around here a little bit lighter. Just on the hand. With the rigger again. And make the shapes that you feel you can see with it. I think, to be honest, I'm just going to stop there. A little bit more peachiness in here. That'll be it. Just let myself get completely absorbed in it. And that's it. I just want a tiny bit of dark under here. Just change the shape of that around slightly. And that'll be it. Happy with that. Just happy creating away and getting some space to paint and try and explore and just see what happens. Always a surprise as well. Sometimes we never really know what they're going to turn out like. Sometimes pull the tape off a bit roughly there. I'm going to take the tape off. I really hope that's been really enjoyable and enjoy creating something new, transforming your bit of paper with colours and textures and just enjoying it. That's just gone. That's just missed. I've got another paper there for some reason. It's just ripped. Let's do that. And then, always have a look at it a little bit later, another day, and just see it as part of your journey and enjoy. And I'll see you next time. Bye.